Hello, this is the Luckbox News Roundup. First up in Counter-Strike news, Tyler Skadoodle Latham has announced his retirement from Cloud9 and CSGO Esports. Skadoodle, a world-class AWPer, will step down from the C9 roster once they've confirmed a replacement for his position. Now, Michal, you're joining us here. Thanks for joining me on this news roundup. Have you got thoughts on Skadoodle leaving? He was an iconic American player. How will the North American region fare without him?
Well, I think if somebody told you probably, a couple of weeks after the Boston Major this year, after Skadoodle and Cloud9 were champions of it, that he would quit, 9 months later, I'm not sure if people would believe you, but at the same time, it's actually not a bad time for him to call it quits, because he's won a major. He's done very well.
He was MVP as well in the Boston Major.
But his team was dismantled to some degree. I mean, they've lost Tarek, they've lost Stewie. It wasn't the same anymore. I don't know what the reasons are. I haven't read too much into it, but I read an interesting tweet that some people envy him the opportunity to retire the year that he won a major. So let's leave it at that.
Okay. Next up, it's ELEAGUE news. So I'm not sure how you want to respond to this, but there was basically a tweet from Turner Sports which said ELEAGUE's latest episode of the CSGO Premier Series has set a new record as the most viewed esports program in the history of cable TV, with an average of nearly 700,000 viewers. And that was a series that was in July, featured 8 world-class teams. So are we done with live streaming? Should we just pack it in, switch to TV now? I'm a little confused by it myself, because the peak viewership on Twitch and Western live streams was around 200,000. So 700,000 on cable.
I don't know what to make of it, to be honest. I'm not an expert in television ratings. However, I still think that TV in general needs to figure out a future for itself, just like any of the traditional media that we used to consume needs to figure out a future for themselves, because I think everybody in esports these days, every young person in the world, enjoys the fact that there's so much content out in the open, and with so many video games that are interesting, so many tournaments that are competing for the viewer's attention, I think the ones that are hard to get to are actually going to be the least watched. So if I'm guessing, it's Turner actually doing very well to educate the native TV audience about Counter-Strike and grabbing their attention, which to me makes sense.
Okay, well, we'll have to see how those numbers pan out in the future. And the last bit of, well, 2 more pieces. We've got news that Russian lottery distributor, Stoloto, I'm going to call them, has partnered with Epicenter for the CSGO tournament next week in Moscow. And they're hoping to reinvigorate lotteries in Russia and attract a new audience of younger players. Now, Luckbox is a esports betting company, but I still a little bemused that a lottery company wants to be involved in esports. Do you have thoughts on this?
Well, I think if you want to grab a large young audience that has decided not to look at ads on websites, not to watch TV, not to listen to the radio, they practically choose what they're involved in. It's the old story of esports marketing, right? It's the elusive millennial or generation, whatever letter the Americans came up with. It's tough to get those guys' attention, and esports is a very good way. So it doesn't matter if it's a carton of milk that you're selling, a can of a soft drink, or a lotto service, or whatever it might be, a vacuum cleaner, esports is a very good way to reach a young audience.
Okay. We'll see how that event pans out. We'll be watching it next week. Finally, we've got ENCE, who were surprise winners of Star Series Season 6. They defeated BIG in the quarters, Optic in the semis, and they played against Vega, so they were also underdogs, who beat Fragsters and NRG. So a bit of a surprise win for them, and they're playing next week in Epicenter too.
Yeah, I'd say overall, if you look very closely at results in Counter-Strike, I think the playing field has broadened more than ever before, and I think the teams that it's typically, you have an event of 8 to 16 teams, 6 to 8 teams typically get a direct invite, and it's usually a group of the same 10 teams for a period of 6 months, when the top 8 in the ranking more or less stays the same, but actually outside of that top 10, there's probably double that number of teams that on any given Sunday can make a top 4 finish. But the community doesn't see it this way. But that's because, they never get to see those uninvited teams get to the semis often enough to really, really respect those teams. But there's plenty of teams that are out there that have the quality to really win a big game or two, and if they got enough chances, they could squeeze into that top 8 and become let's call it a household name.
Okay, well, maybe we'll see more from ENCE in the future. Am I saying that right? Is that ENCE or ENCE?
I have absolutely no idea. Plus, I don't think anybody in esports cares about butchering somebody's nickname or last name or first name anymore. So.
Okay, so we'll butcher away. Anyway, on to Dota 2. We just had the main cast Autumn Brawl featuring 20 Dota 2 teams. That was played out last weekend. And that was our first look of this new year of Dota. And if the results are anything to go by, it's just more of the same, with Virtus Pro dominant against most of these teams. Do you watch Dota, by the way, Michal?
I watch it around the international, to be honest, and around ESL events, but that's basically it. So I don't think you're gonna, even though I might give you an answer, I don't think that would be a answer of a good enough quality for people's time, not to waste their time.
Okay, well, I mean, you must have heard of Dendi and Puppy, because we had the news last week that Dendi was going to stand in Puppy's team. They're both ex-Na'Vi players and joined together again one last time, but playing against their old team. They were knocked out by Na'Vi though, so that run did not go very far. And maybe this is something I do want to ask you then. Redeye last week on our podcast said that Dendi, as a legend, should go on to become a support, become a captain, and use his experience to propel a new team forward. What do we do with washed-up old gamers once they've passed their prime? Or does such a thing exist? Or what do you do once you've maybe played out your time as an esports star?
What I would do is milk any media friendliness that my character has and make money through endorsements, media appearances, whatever. Obviously, not everybody can do that. Some players are shy, don't want to give interviews and things like that. I think a lot of players have much to offer in many different aspects. So, for example, Virtus Pro has Kuban, who he's won with the previous iteration under a different brand. He's won CS 1.6 events. He's now the manager of the team. There are players who have become commentators, very good ones as well. There are people who are running businesses now as former pro gamers. Heaton, he was one of the co-founders of the current business of Ninjas in Pajamas. So there's plenty that you can do. It's just that, just like with sports, right? You've got Gary Lineker going on to make a fantastic career for himself in the media, to the degree that you would have thought that he's simply he was born with a microphone rather than as a footballer. But then you have, I don't want to name, specific names that probably failed the transition from being athletes to something else. But there's always that blend, the variety of people. Some people will do extremely well at whatever they do. Others, all they knew to do what they. I'm already. It's been a long day.
Yeah.
Others just don't know what to do once they stop playing.
It's a golden era of esports still, so people with that experience are very valuable. Let's move on, and this is a subject which I do want to hear your feedback on. We saw the World Showdown of Esports, #1 in Las Vegas. Team Serenity were crowned champions after beating J-Storm in the final. This is about ESP Gaming, their director of talent, Richard Lewis, too, and they're trying to create a different form of esports entertainment with WSOE. They've taken inspiration from boxing and MMA broadcasts, and they want to present these matches as individual dramatic head-to-head showdowns in the Vegas tradition. So I feel like they're planting a flag down and saying they're different to everyone else, and everyone else being particularly ESL events. Do you think that's a fair way to go? Is that what they're doing? Is it going to be successful?
Well, I don't think there's a blueprint for esports yet, where you've got not just one or two or three companies trying new things. We've got plenty of companies trying new things. Overwatch League trying to settle teams to certain cities and run events from individual cities. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer yet, and I don't think we're past the stage where we shouldn't experiment, because it may very well be that what these guys are doing in Vegas is actually the right way to do esports. And if it's not the way to do esports, it may be one of those flavors that people will enjoy every now and then, or maybe not. That's the fun part about esports. We never know, especially there's a new game, new genre, and you have to have a completely different approach to it. Battle Royale, for example.
Yep, perfect. There is, and the last bit of Dota news is ESL 1 Hamburg. So this is potentially the first big tournament since TI8, but it's not part of the DPC. There are no DPC points on offer here, but the tournament has an impressive lineup of 12 Dota 2 teams. We've got 8 direct invites: Virtus Pro, EG Secret, Mineski, NIP, Forward Gaming, Pain, and Vici Gaming, and 4 regionally qualified teams: Alliance, Complexity, Team Master, and EVOS Esports. So I'll be in Hamburg to watch that myself. Will you be there, Michal?
No, unfortunately, I have to miss that one.
Do you have... yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, the new DPC system that Valve have created, does that affect you in the way that you work with these large events?
Well, you'd have to ask somebody else at ESL, since I specifically hardly ever touch Dota, other than trolling some players every now and then that don't know me.
Okay.
Which is still remains unreleased, but I'm getting to it soon. Every time a publisher does something, it affects you. It just depends what they do and how much space they leave for third parties to work with their game. And from game to game, it's different. So every time anybody does anything, it has an influence on let's say the non-publisher world, and sometimes a very profound one.
Okay. I want to move on to Overwatch now. This is quite interesting. I know you've had lots of discussions about the franchise model versus traditional esports, shall we say. The news right now is the new Vancouver franchise for Overwatch League has announced a partnership with Luminosity. In the announcement, they said the partnership would help craft and implement our strategy surrounding player acquisition, key staffing, day-to-day operations, marketing, and more. Now, that to me sounds like pretty much most of the Overwatch stuff in having an Overwatch team. So it makes sense to call in Luminosity, obviously, as pretty much legends in that field. But what do you think? Because to me, I feel a little sad that Luminosity are being called in to help with it, rather than being right in the middle of that arrangement of a Canadian Overwatch team.
Well, I don't think Luminosity has $30 million to spare to buy themselves into the league. So it stands to the reason that they would be a partner or a subcontractor for the team owner to actually manage that business for them. That's the road that Blizzard and Activision chose for Overwatch League. I can't say that I wholeheartedly agree with everything they do, but so far they are the prettiest girl in the mainstream press's ball, so to speak. But we'll see about the future.
Okay. One more thing about Overwatch League then. We just got news that they're going to cut the season length from 40 games to 28 for 2019, and they hope to give their franchises more time to spend in their designated regional markets, thereby build meaningful engagement with local fans. Obviously, I agree with that sentiment, but what it does highlight to me is the fact that the regional franchises aren't really very representative of their areas yet. And I feel this very much as a Londoner, seeing the London Spitfire team who don't speak any English. And is this a sign of Overwatch League moving in the right direction, or what do you expect to see from in this respect?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. It might be. It might well be that they are, planting the seeds to build communities, and certain teams have done better than others in that already. Maybe the teams really do need to. I mean, look, if you have a franchise from Paris and your players live in Santa Monica and compete in Santa Monica or Burbank, actually, and they have to train and compete, and the only good practice that you can ever get actually for Overwatch is around the Burbank area where all the pro teams live. So if you go to Europe, you're actually going to sacrifice precious practice time. So from that perspective, how else would they actually spend time to build their grassroots fan base up in the cities? Although personally, I don't believe that actually going to a specific city and saying this is the London team is the way to go, because I think a lot of people in Europe, much more people in Europe, would associate themselves with what Fnatic stands for and who they are, much less so just with the City of London. To me, as a Polish guy, City of London means nothing. It's London, okay, well, never been to London, maybe I went there and it rained and I didn't like it. Don't love London. But Fnatic can convince anyone in the world to like them. So I think it's actually in the global scheme of things, it's actually to the team's detriment that they're rooted to a city and they carry the city name in the team name.
So it's actually baggage rather than an extra benefit to them.
Well, if you're just building completely brand new entities, it's not baggage, because it's a very good shortcut to an identity. But it can only grow to a certain level, and beyond that, I think it's baggage. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's all from the Luckbox news roundup this week. We'll be doing this every week, so see you next time.